Chapter 1. Leadership is not a promotion. Why pressure hits new leaders hardest. Most leaders remember the day they were promoted. Sometimes it came with excitement, sometimes relief, sometimes a quiet sense of validation that the hard work had finally paid off. A new title, more responsibility, a bigger seat at the table. What almost never came with that promotion was preparation. Instead, many leaders step into their first real leadership role believing that they are simply being asked to do more of what already worked: more experience, more expertise, more answers, more effort. That assumption is where pressure begins. I remember stepping into leadership believing the promotion meant I was trusted to have more answers. What I didn't realize was that it meant I was now responsible for building answers through other people, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The skills that get someone promoted, competence, reliability, problem solving, execution, are valuable. They just aren't sufficient for leading people. And when new leaders discover that gap, it usually happens under pressure. Pressure hits new leaders hardest because leadership is the first role where success is no longer defined by what you can do, but by what others can do because of you. That shift catches people off guard. When a high performer becomes a leader, they carry an expectation that often goes unspoken. I know how this work should be done. They earned credibility by producing results. They solved problems quickly. They were dependable when things went wrong. So when pressure shows up, missed deadlines, performance issues, conflict, uncertainty, the instinct is predictable. They step in, they fix, they decide, they execute. At first, it works. The team moves, the problems resolve, the leader feels useful again, but something else is happening beneath the surface. Every time a leader steps in to solve instead of support, they teach the team a lesson, often without realizing it. The lesson isn't about competence, it's about ownership. Over time, people stop thinking as broadly. They hesitate before acting. They wait. Pressure doesn't create this behavior, it reveals it. Leadership is the first role where pressure exposes a dangerous misunderstanding that authority is leverage. New leaders assume more authority means more control, that clearer direction will eliminate uncertainty, that tighter oversight will reduce mistakes, that speed matters more than development when stakes are high. Under pressure, those assumptions just don't weaken leadership, they magnify its limits. Leaders who rely on control become bottlenecks. Decisions slow because everything routes through them. Teams grow dependent instead of capable. Leaders work longer hours while their people grow quieter. This is the moment many leaders don't talk about. The quiet realization that working harder isn't fixing the problem, and stepping back feels dangerous. The tension between knowing something isn't right and not knowing what to do instead. The fatigue that comes from carrying responsibility that was never meant to rest on one set of shoulders. Pressure increases, not because the team is incapable, but because leadership is being carried by one person instead of distributed across many. This is where shame often enters the picture. Leaders don't say it out loud, but the thought creeps in. Why does this feel harder than it should? They look around and assume everyone else has figured it out. So they push through, they tighten up. They tell themselves leadership just requires more resilience. The truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. You weren't promoted into leadership. You were promoted into a completely different job. Managing tasks and leading people are not adjacent skills. They are different disciplines. One is built on control and predictability. The other is built on trust and development. One optimizes for efficiency. The other builds capacity. New leaders struggle under pressure because they're trying to solve people problems with task tools. When pressure rises, task tools feel safer. They're familiar. They're measurable. They provide immediate feedback. Leadership tools, coaching, trust, patience, clarity, feel slower and less certain. So leaders default to what they know. This isn't a character flaw, it's a skill gap. Pressure also hits new leaders hardest because expectations are rarely reset. Organizations are good at promoting people. They're far less effective at redefining success once someone has been promoted. New leaders are elevated on results but barely coached on how those results should be achieved. So when outcomes dip or conflict emerges, leaders assume they must personally intervene to protect outcomes. That belief drives control. And under pressure, control feels like leadership until it doesn't. There is a moment many leaders experience, often privately, when they realize the very thing that made them successful is now holding them back. They notice their team waits for answers instead of offering ideas. Initiative slows. Capable people hesitate. The leader responds by pushing harder, believing urgency is going to fix the issue. Urgency without clarity doesn't create momentum, it creates stress. And stress narrows thinking. Pressure doesn't demand more direction, it demands better leadership. Leadership under pressure requires different posture. Instead of asking, how do I fix this quickly? Leaders must learn to ask, how do I build people who can carry this forward? That shift is uncomfortable, especially for new leaders. It requires letting go of the identity that earned them the promotion in the first place. It means resisting the urge to prove competence and choosing instead to build trust. Trust feels riskier under pressure. Control feels safer. That's why so many leaders choose it. This book wasn't written to criticize that instinct. It was written to redirect it. Leadership isn't intuitive, it's learned. And the learning curve is steepest at the exact moment when pressure is highest and support is lowest. Leaders who succeed aren't the ones who avoid pressure. They're the ones who learn to lead through it without reverting to control. They understand leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating the conditions where the answers can emerge. That understanding doesn't come from a title. It comes from practice. Pressure will continue to show up. Promotions will continue to come without instructions. Leaders will continue to feel the pull to step in, tighten up, and take over. The question isn't whether pressure will test you. The question is, how will you respond when it does? You can protect outcomes by controlling more, or you can build people strong enough to carry the work forward. The choice won't be made once. It'll be made repeatedly, often in small moments, often when no one is watching. Leadership is not a promotion. It's a transformation. And it begins the moment you realize that doing more yourself is no longer the answer. Where this leads next. Pressure reveals leadership, but how leaders respond under pressure determines everything that follows. In the next chapter, we'll explore the distinction that shapes every pressured decision a leader makes, the difference between control and connection, and why one quietly undermines performance while the other strengthens it. Because when leadership gets hard, the way you respond decides whether pressure breaks your team or builds it. That concludes this episode of Built for Pressure. Built for Pressure is a copyrighted work by Richard Levene. All rights reserved. This content may not be reproduced, distributed, or repurposed without permission. If this episode resonated, you can find the full framework at richardlevene.com.